Madam President.
Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Oklahoma.
I ask that the pending amendment be set aside and Amendment 66 be called up.
Without objection, the clerk will report the amendment.
The senator from Oklahoma, Mr. Coburn, for himself and Mr. McCain, proposes amendment numbered 66.
Madam President, this is a fairly straightforward amendment. It actually follows the guidelines of the recommendations of the Office of Management and Budget. The administration claims that during this sequestration period, we will have to furlough essential government workers, which will negatively impact the daily lives of the American people. Despite dire warnings to cuts to TSA agents, by the way, Director Pistole thinks they're going to be just fine, totally opposite of what the rest of the administration has said. Air traffic controllers, food inspectors, have been thousands of new federal jobs posting since the sequester went into effect. And let me just spend a minute. Sequester has been in effect. The Department of Treasury is looking to hire a leadership development specialist with a salary of $182,000 a year. The FDI advertised for a social media management service to streamline management of multiple social media platforms. 23 openings on the federal jobs list for recreation, recreation aid, recreation specialist, recreation assistant. The Air Force is looking to hire several full-time painters, searching to pay $165,000 for a directory of history and museum policies and programs. The Department of Treasury is currently advertising for an outreach manager. The Department of Labor is looking for a staff assistant at $81,000 a year to answer the phone. Policy coordinator for the Department of Health and Human Services to attend and facilitate meetings at $81,000 a year. A director of the Air Force History and Museum Policies and Programs at $165,000 a year. An analyst for Legislative Affairs Office at the Marine Corps at $90,000 a year. The Department of Agriculture Director of Government Employee Services at a range of $179,000 a year. A counsel for the Morris K. Udall Scholarship Foundation at $155,000 a year. An executive assistant at the Department of Agriculture Forest Service to prepare itineraries for travel plans. An executive staff officer for the Air Force to represent the Director of Staff at meetings, write draft reports and memos at $93,000. All of these non-priority hirings at a time of when we're in sequester, what this amendment would do is simply implement OMB's guidance and freeze hiring for non-essential federal positions during sequestration, but still allow hiring of employees defined by the Office of Personnel Management as accepted or emergency personnel. This amendment does not freeze hiring of accepted or emergency employees as defined by OPM, and we all know what those mean. There's also an exception in here that gives agencies the necessary flexibility in defining which types of new hires are performing critical duties and allows their progression. Right now, the agencies aren't even following OMB's guidance. We hear about possible furloughs, but a good portion of those furloughs would never be necessary if, in fact, the agencies would follow OMB's guidance. So the government's seeking to hire travel specialists, recreation aides, public affairs specialists, outreach managers, librarians, historians, painters, administrative assistants, and many other non-essential positions for where we find ourselves today. The Department of Health and Human Services has posted a job opening for a travel specialist at a salary of $97,000 a year, and their job is to obtain domestic and international travel for HHS officials. It's not essential to their overall mission, and it actually facilitates more travel, which is one of the things that's also recommended by OMB in their guidance, is that they not do it. All we're saying is to follow the OMB guidance. Freezing of non-essential new hiring could prevent furloughs to the government workers that are carrying out essential services today. and mission-critical duties. I have no question that some of these can be helpful to the agency that they've advertised for, but they're not necessary at this time until we get past this pothole in the road. Canceling job openings at FAA to 2 community planners and 4 management and program assistants would spare 1,000 air traffic controllers from furlough. Let me say that again. Just canceling, not hiring these 4 people at FAA could affect 1,000 federal employees. Canceling just 1 job opening for a librarian in the Department of Agriculture could offset 1 furlough day for as many as 750 entry-level workers at the Department of Agriculture. So what we're asking for is simply for the agencies to follow the guidance that's already been out there, and we would mandate that as a part of this continuing resolution omnibus appropriation bill. With that, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland.
Mr. President.